And we are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicinda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope and desire is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but my favorite one is actually just sitting down with those designers to talk about who they are and a little bit about their work, and that is what we are doing today. I'm sitting down with Joel Hines, coming back on the stream. It's been a little bit, but we got a chance to play Joel's Desert Moons of Karth on stream. Had a great chance to watch Joel's games grow and designs expand, and now get a chance to watch you step into publishing. But for folks who are not familiar with you or your work, why don't you tell us a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Joel Hines. I'm from Carson City, Nevada originally. Got a little flag back there. And anyway, I started out writing. I got really into writing RPGs, specifically Mothership originally, which is a sci-fi horror RPG about a couple years ago, deep in the pandemic. And I ran a Kickstarter for the space Western called Desert Moon of Karth, and it did fairly well. People responded well to it. So then I did a second one with my good friend Danny Liebster called Abilities Considered Unnatural, which was a sort of Jedi-inspired mine crawl horror small town adventure, which really people also seem to like. And now after this, I'm taking a break. I've got a couple Mothership projects in the pipeline, but I decided to try my hand at publishing some really cool stuff from the first one. This is the first project I published that isn't I haven't been the writer on, and this is by Chance Dudenak, called Secret of the Black Crag, which is a 100-page book written for OSE. It's a sort of island crawl pirate adventure that's very sandboxy, lots of factions centered around a dungeon. And Chance is the author of the Black Worm of Brandon's Ford, which got a little press and critical acclaim for being a really well-designed, tight sandbox sort of introductory adventure module. And it's been fun working with fantasy, with him sort of taking some influence from my Mothership work, but also seeing what he has to do from sort of old school essentials, which is another area I really appreciate working with. And so that's sort of where I've come from and am going, if that sort of covers it, I guess.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk about the module a little bit more in just 1 second. But I'm super excited to dive into it. When I first saw it, I was a little surprised because you had done Mothership. Then I saw it was a partnership with Chance. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about all that stuff and kind of dive into it. What let's just start with a little bit. You mentioned it's a sandbox adventure for OSE. What made this kind of be the product that you wanted to kind of dive into publishing with?
So I think there's a couple of things. First, I really enjoy fantasy, sort of old school adventures like sandboxes, as well as a sort of science fiction Mothership. And so these there are two sort of areas of design that I really I've got some projects of my own in the pipeline that are more sort of old school fantasy inspired than Mothershipy, as well as those. And then seeing Chance's work on Black Worm and seeing that he hadn't been didn't have any other big projects I'd heard about, I decided to send him a message and say, hey, I'd like to work with you and sort of like commission a sandbox if you have anything interesting that you've been that's been going around your mind. Here's sort of the specs for roughly what I'm looking at. And if you have anything like that, I would love to, like pay you to make that and work with you on like a project. And we talked back and forth and we came to like a cool agreement. And then it's been fun, like going back and forth on the development of the project too. And I think I really like his style of sort of both as a person, the communication's great, but also the design that he has, sort of evocative stuff that is both minimal but not stripped down to none of the inspirational, folkloric, or fun character NPCs. It's got enough flavor, but not a lot of cruft or clunkiness to get in the way.
Love it. We'll talk a little bit more about the project in just a minute. Let's talk about you first. Let's talk about
absolutely
how you got started playing RPGs. What was kind of your entry point into starting to play and getting into the scene originally?
Yeah, for me, I think it was probably so about 3.5 was the first D&D that I played. And so this was like, I don't know, middle 2008 or 2007, somewhere around there, where I started hearing about D&D, and I was reading all of the articles online. I'd buy the books, I'd read the books, and, I wouldn't have anyone to play with because, or elementary school, I guess, it's sort of hard to, figure out logistics and all that and find people who wanted to do that stuff. And, I'd spend a lot of time putting together these complex character builds and, assigning like, I'll build a stronghold and these mithril walls cost like 1,000 gold pieces per square foot. And then I'll make this part invisible. And, a lot of, I think they call it lonely fun, like sort of, crafting stuff behind the scenes. Yeah. And then I played a couple games, and then in college, I played a few more, I guess Pathfinder 3.5. And then it wasn't until after college I really got into it because I had the time and found people interested. And I ran a couple of 5th edition games. And then after that, I kept on looking for sort of weird niche third-party modules. And eventually, I don't know exactly how I stumbled upon like the whole sort of old school and adjacent scene and sort of that whole universe of independent RPGs, and really just got into this weird niche. And then found Mothership, which was its own, interesting stew of stuff that was a lot of fun to get into.
Yeah. What was your entry point into Mothership? Like, I know for a lot of people, it was a lot, same thing, a lot of reading, maybe a one shot here and there. What kind of got you started on that vein?
It's funny. My original and still one of my favorites science fiction RPGs I was really into Stars Without Number. And I played a campaign of that and had a blast. It's a very good sandbox system as well. And I was looking into publishing a module for that, like a zine or something. And there's really, it's a great system, but it's sort of built around hacking other content from other systems. And so in terms of it, there's really no point in making a Stars Without Number exclusive adventure because you're just going to drive away people who would be less inclined to, play that versus the Stars Without Number people. They're happy to hack and cut apart any type of module. And so Ian Newsom actually recommended, he said, hey, you should look into this whole Mothership thing. I've got a third-party server. And at that point, I read some of the adventures and I was like, wow, Dead Planet, amazing, very... and I saw how minimal they could be while still having that sort of sandboxy, open-ended element. And it really, seeing the type of design and layout and very a conscious work put into every sort of small aspect of the products. And I guess the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the community vibe around it really helped get me interested as well, seeing all the people doing creative things. And there's a real, I think, snowball effect of having a lot of people bouncing ideas off of each other. And that's what got me into it, playing some of the original modules. And I was like, all right, I'll make Desert Moon Karth, which isn't a particularly spooky module as Mothership goes. And it sort of shows some of its sandboxy, more, it's like PG-13 rated versus, it's not quite Event Horizon or Alien, but it's definitely got its spooky factor too.
No, but I also like the vibes of Desert Moon are, like, I really love,
Mhm.
because there are these horrific things there, but they're the horrific things that essentially. I mean, there's some very much like Tombstone-esque, right? Because it is a Western vibe of like,
Mhm.
hey, there are bad things and bad people in this town, and those things are very evident, and they might do some very unpleasant things to you. But there's also some of the slow burn of some of the alien stuff happening in the
Mhm.
background of the planet that is it's way more subtle and doesn't really necessarily crop up until you start
Mhm.
to think about why this is so disturbing,
Yeah.
or what this might signify, in a way that I really enjoyed kind of getting a chance to just kind of play through it a
Mhm.
little bit, but also read through it. And it does have, a lot of times Mothership is very much about like tight liminal spaces of transition. Whereas Karth, though there is some of that, especially as you get off your ship and have to jump
Mhm.
and leap over to a giant space elevator that'll take you down. Once you're on the planet itself, has a really expansive open world feel to it that you don't always see, but can create a sense of isolation in the same exact
Mhm.
way that tight spaces can. So it's a really cool exploration of that. What were some of your kind of influences you were kind of starting to sit through and look through? You talked about, reading these other
Mhm.
modules, look at things, kind of taking this kind of shifted approach on what Mothership was doing, which I think is one of the great things about Mothership as a whole. Is
Mhm.
a lot of people will apply, like, I played slasher Mothership stuff. We played very kind of
Yeah.
traditional alien stuff. We
Oh yeah, I
played
think that was the
Desert
one.
Moons of Karth.
Was
Yeah,
that the one in Hullbreach?
that was the one in Hullbreach. Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah,
like we
that's the
got.
one I wrote.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was yours also too. So we got
Uh huh.
to play the slasher one, which is very, very good, right? So like, but
Mhm.
it is, a lot of people will do their own very, very specific take on the space horror genre,
Mhm.
even within Mothership, by just putting it on a planet, putting it in a different type of ship, putting it in a different ecosystem. What were some of the things that, as you were looking at Desert Moons of Karth and abilities considered unnatural, that you kind of wanted to flex out or explore in that space?
Yeah, I think where I found so initially I was sort of coming from not necessarily a horror RPG horror designer background, and it's definitely I had to sort of learn those elements, I think, and sort of I think blend them into the sort of my sort of sandbox inclinations, I think. And uh, I think sorry, could you repeat the question again? I
Oh, just
sort of
what are
lost
some
my
of the
train.
things that you like, kind of like
Yeah.
you wanted to explore within that space?
Yes. And so I really wanted to sort of provide a little bit of breathing room almost in sort of a campaign, because I think if you're running a horror type game, and if every session, if you're going to play a lot of them, and every session is high octane alien or the thing or right, or any variety of you know um, top level adrenaline, I think that can be you lose a little bit of the ups and downs. And I think that that's sort of where one shots, where you can have that intense thing. If you're going to have a campaign, I think, and sort of maintain a certain level of tenseness, I think there needs to be times that sort of breathe and are a little less high octane. And I think Desert Moon of Karth sort of fits in there. Whereas, and it can really ramp up. And I've seen some crazy ways where people, just destroy the entire world and things go to hell. But it starts out a little less overtly threatening and deadly than I think a lot of really cool Mothership modules as well. And abilities considered natural, I think, sort of takes a little bit of the sandbox element as well, but sort of parses it down. It's more of a it's sort of me and Danny Liebster, my co-writing partner on this one, sort of take on the sort of traditional. There's a dungeon and there's a town. So like the town of Omelette, one of the old D&D modules, sort of has this. It's got the moat house dungeon, and it's got this town, and this town's fleshed out with these weird NPCs who some have connections to the dungeon, some who don't. And we're trying to have that sort of the book sort of broken into this like half of it's more or less is the town, half's the dungeon. And there's this clear like I liked how you phrased it. This sort of these liminal spaces, these transitions in between, like you're in a different place with different rules, I think is a really cool thing about RPGs. And yeah, sort of taking the dungeon crawl sort of framework and spooking it up, I guess, making it a bit more sci-fi Mothership, and keeping it having a sort of dangerous crawl experience while also bringing up in the horror level to bring it more in fitting with a science fiction horror campaign, I think was sort of the goals with that. And then a healthy dose of taking Star Wars and inspiration and being like, but what if it was spooky and there were more culty? That was a big part of the initial impetus for it.
Awesome. Trasherama over in the chat says a couple of things. They said they really like Desert Moon. It throws neat cues in the readout as you're working through that really helped them the first time they were running it. Also, they across both books so far, they really like the layout and editing. You've got a lot of Mothership, as well as just kind of in the scene right now. We see a lot of like very gonzo, very random, very over the top, but they really loved the clean layout on both of these books. And so, I think the thing that caught me about Desert Moon originally was just the vibes of the art were really strong. And you do a really phenomenal job of kind of thinking about everything. It feels like as a cohesive package, right? Like even the music that you brought in for Desert Moon, which I think was either a friend or a family member of yours who did it.
Yeah, my brother did a big part, and then one of his friends and another one of mine.
Yeah, they all really tie together to really drive at the theme of an individual book, which I think, and a lot of times in zines, we don't see that same kind of consideration. And Mothership already has a very strong layout aesthetic, but some of the ways that you almost soften some of the edges a little bit, give it the ability again for that rise and fall that I think is very unique to the design that you bring in, that we don't see in a lot of the other designs we see come out of Mothership or other zines that are doing a strong aesthetic right now. And so I want to ask, you use this kind of light orangish seafoam color in both. Is that just a color you happen to like, or is that a
like sort of like this sort of
yeah. Is that like a signature Joel Hines color scheme there? Or is that just happenstance?
I'd say happenstance. I think it might reveal. Let's see if a third book has a bunch of that, and then I'll let you know it's something deep down. But I do like some of the I guess pastel-y colors. I think they have a nice a retro vibe, but also being a little soft and approachable.
100%. No, I was really funny. I sent a project to a coworker today, and they were like, "Well, our logo's not on it." I was like, "I understand that," and I was like, "But it's in our brand color with the brand elements that we've been building." And at some point, we don't need to slap our logo on everything. We need to help people understand when they look at something that this comes from us just by the way it comes across. So I love seeing like crossovers and commonalities from one design phase to another design phase for designers. I think it helps build out a little bit more. Looking at something and being like, oh, is this a Silver Arm Press book or project? Did Joel have a hand in this? Sometimes you get a little bit of a sense of those things as they build over time. So you mentioned we're gonna shift in just a second over to that over to talking about a little bit about Black Sea Crag.
Secret of the Black Crag.
The secret of the Black. I keep on wanting to say Craig though, like as if it's about it's about somebody whose like pirate name is Black Crag, as opposed to it being about the Black Crag.
That's the spinoff. We'll get there.
Black Crag of the Black Crag. We'll talk about it a little bit more in just one second. But you did mention you do have some other plans. Any hints on kind of just the things right now that you're thinking about in the background for the next time you sit down to design in the Mothership space?
So I can give you some general ideas, and then this isn't legally binding or anything like that.
You're welcome to do what you want with your life moving forward.
Exactly. It might be entirely different, but loosely, basically, we're gonna wrap up the Kickstarter on this and make sure get it wrapped up, all the production as quickly as possible, and get everybody's nice books out to them. And then after that, I'm going to once we've taken care of all of this for Secret of the Black Crag, I'm going to move on to February, more or less. I'm trying to do a spiritual sequel to Desert Moon of Karth called, and I think I talked about this way back, when we talked last time. Tide World of Mani is the working title of it. It's it's loosely linked to Karth. It's an ocean world with Mad Max and Water World, the 90s movie inspirations to it. And it should be fun and sort of fit a similar sort of sandbox mold. And I'll be excited to sort of return to that type of that format. I think will be fun.
And then you get the nice Caladan to your Arrakis also too.
Oh wow, yeah. So everybody, that's it. Subconsciously, everybody's doing a little bit of Dune.
Everybody's doing a little bit of Dune. And since I was a Dune nerd before Dune was back in the public consciousness. I'm always thrilled when I can do a Dune deep cut. At one time, Alec Trebek didn't know the answer to a question on Jeopardy, and the answer was Dune, and I yelled "Suck it, Trebek" at the screen very, very loudly. I love Alex Trebek and miss him deeply. But so we've got Black Crag happening now. Again, we mentioned your first partnership. Tell us a little bit, like, you mentioned different life changes, some other stuff like that. Why choose to shift into publishing other people's work as opposed to just doing another project yourself?
I think it comes down to like the fact that in order to produce the number of cool things that I want to, if it was just me writing them, I do not have the bandwidth to put out a consistent 2 to 3 things a year. And on the other part of that is I really want to see cool stuff that I like out there. And if I get it published from people who I like their work, then I can ensure that those books, exist. And generally, if I like the book, like I hope that I've got a certain taste that other people will share as well, and also like the book, basically.
Awesome. Well, you talked about it a little bit. I've got it up next to us. Let's be quiet for just a second. You won't be able to hear it, but I'm going to play the video on the Kickstarter. The audience will be able to hear it, though, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I'll be quiet for the 54 seconds. We've got another great score, another solid banger that really drives home the theme. Did somebody compose this music for you? Did you find this somewhere? That's going to be shout out to my brother Eric Hines and his friend Kevin as well. Eric did the guitar. Kevin did a lot of the mastering and other instrumentation there.
I love it. You're already $23,000 in, a little over. You got a little over 500 backers and 22 more days to go. So plenty of time to kind of watch this campaign grow. I'm very, very excited about it. But you've kind of this is a different venture for you. Like we said, you're not the creator, you're the publisher. What has that kind of collaboration been like? You mentioned kind of approaching Chance and saying, "Hey, I really love this piece of work you did. What if we worked on a sandbox and we made that happen? I'll publish what you do." What was that conversation like as you kind of stepped into the space? Because actually, just in the last 24 hours, there's been a lot of conversation on Twitter, at least in the
I'm glad this
space,
is timely.
About publishing partnerships, what print partnerships look like, what do contracts look like. We don't have to get into all that, but it is a question a lot of people are starting to ask right now as folks like Plus One step into doing more publishing and print partnerships as Exalted continues to grow. Tell us a little bit about the Silver Arm approach as you got started in this conversation.
Sure. I think it's important to find, I think just the core thing is to find good people and to pay them for what they do. I think that's the first sort of framework there. And that goes with the past projects, all the art, the layout, and in this project as well, editing, art as well, and then now writing with Chance here. And I think it's just important for people to communicate and value whoever you're working with and the work that they're putting in, and to come to an agreement where everybody is, I think, very, very happy with however the breakdown is, I think. And with small publishing, I think it's it's interesting because everyone's sort of making it up a little bit as they like their specific sort of practices, and there isn't a sort of one set framework. Like I've seen so many different models people have, and I think some are better than others, and especially look at with big companies like some of the reported pay, like average pay for writing for like and maybe this has gone up. I don't want to, single out Wizards of the Coast or anything.
We can always, you're always allowed to punch.
It's low hanging fruit, it's
Yeah.
easy applause. But yeah, I think like when these big companies are paying, piddly sticks for what they're offered, the amount that they print, stacks, millions of these books or hundreds of thousands or whichever. I think there's a lot of room for people to push for more, I think. And it's definitely, I think the nice thing is if you value people, and I think you pay them what they want to be paid, then it's going to be easier to find like people who are really good at what they do, as opposed to if you're trying to convince people to work for pennies or whichever, I think. And again, that number and how the breakdown works is going to vary a lot from like company to company, right? There's no sort of one size fits all approach. But I think just going in with the philosophy of that, like it is worth like heaps in the long run, just paying like a little bit more to pay folks what they're worth or what they want, and for art or layout or writing will result in a much better working relationship with people who are really good at what they do. And you're going to have great stuff, I think, because they're good at what they do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We generally at +1, like we have a no haggling policy. Like if somebody says this is how much my work is worth, and we say, okay. And either we pay them or we say, can't work on this project. It's not in the budget, right? And they may come around and say, well, what is the budget? We may figure out, somewhere between.
Sure. But you don't want to put on the pressure.
I'm not going to say, hey, you said you're worth this much. Too bad I only have this much. And it might impact when and how I can work with people, how often I work with them, all those kind of things. But I would rather pay somebody what they say they are worth than try to tell them why I think they're not worth that much. And lots of times, more often than not, that is me paying somebody more than what they ask than it is paying them less than what they ask. It does happen sometimes, but that's just usually like, hey, we're going to put it in as a stretch goal, or we're going to put it in as something where I know we can hit that funding level before we're going to have that work. I'm not looking to debate it with anybody on what they're looking to be valued. And we also, because we do a lot of minimalist work, realize like paying by the word was weird, because we're basically saying we want you to put the time and energy into learning how to write in a really concise way. And when you do that well, you'll get paid less. And so we moved to just hey, here's the project and here's the rate. And if it's 10 words, that's great. And if it's 100 words, that's great. And those are both numbers that are so small they don't make sense. But just kind of to the point, like that's what we kind of started having to do. But I love the just like, hey, start. And it's what we try to do. Start with people you're excited to work with, who will communicate clearly, who you're excited to have on the team. And then drive those processes forward. So, and for me, a lot of times, like you with Chance, I love this thing. I want to work with this person is 100% my favorite way to kind of pursue some of that.
I just sort of sent out that first to Chance, and then some other people. I've got a couple potential projects in the pipeline as well. And I sort of arrived at those by just, messaging people out of the blue saying, hey, I like your stuff. Here's what I'm interested in doing, like working with you. Is this something that you'd be interested in? We can talk to you. And a lot of it, not everyone, it's not going to work for everybody. People are busy, or they've got different types of projects or frameworks, but it's nice when, folks are interested in the same thing, and you can, come to make something new. It's cool.
Yeah. So did y'all end up, if you're comfortable with it, you don't have to give us specific numbers. Did y'all do advances, royalties? Is it post-campaign funding, pre-campaign funding, or a mix of those things for how the partnership is working?
So yeah, for this one, this is a commissioned project here. So it's paying a per word as well as a percentage of the Kickstarter as well. Sort of the breakdown on this.
That's awesome. No, like I said, and I think like like I said, there was a Walton Wood, who's the editor on Down We Go, put out an article yesterday that a lot of people loved and a lot of people didn't like, which is oftentimes the case with articles
relevant
about just some of the differences in
Yeah.
pay for traditional publishing. Which, I mean, I watched people be wrecked by advances when the book didn't sell, and all of a sudden they owned the publisher back and ended up basically with a life debt to
Is
a
it like
publisher.
an advance? You only get the money once it earns.
So most
the
advances
advance
they
out?
are what they sound like. They are an advance of
Yes.
payment. So if the book doesn't sell,
Yeah, that's
at
my
some point the
understanding.
publisher might come back to you and say, "Hey, you owe
Oh,
us
because
this
the
much
book
money
didn't.
because we advanced you this, but the books didn't sell." And so, and I've had that happen to 5 different friends, where they ended up
Wow,
having to give back a portion of the advance.
that is wild.
And
Yeah,
it's absolutely nuts. And we don't do that almost ever in RPGs. Like advances
yeah,
are largely unheard of. But just the state of where we're at as an industry in print partnerships and publishing and other things like that, yesterday became a really big question mark for some people.
yeah,
And a lot of people had strong feelings. For me, it's always a good chance to just stop and say, what are you doing? And what's the good and the bad of this, right? Because
Yeah.
if somebody, I mean, like we do, like if I pay somebody in advance for work, I'm usually just paying them for their time. Like I'm never going to come back to them and be like, oh, well, the books didn't do that well in crowdfunding, so I'm gonna need I'm gonna need that $500
yeah.
back.
I mean, yeah, as the publisher, right? You're taking the
I'm
risk,
taking that
and you
on,
have to.
right? And
If the risk doesn't pan out, that's on you.
that's on me. And so,
Yeah.
so there were, like I said, a lot of those conversations were kind of coming up yesterday, and a lot of the questions that people don't necessarily consider. Because if somebody comes to you and says, "I want to print your game," oftentimes you're excited about it, or "I'm going to pay you to make a game," you're oftentimes very excited about it, and so you may not ask all the questions or think through all the things you
Yeah.
need to be able to know that. Alternatively, traditional printing is not a clean or generous industry in a lot of ways either. So there's a lot of give and take on both sides of that.
Yeah. And I think, and then this, shoot myself in the foot in the future here, but basically not everybody like a lot of people do not need a publisher of any sort.
Right.
Like that's just like how I self-published Desert Moon of Karth, and then Abilities Considered Unnatural, self-published along with Danny. And that basically the downside, however, to that, like the upside is big because you don't have to deal with anyone else. There's no added costs. Like it is your thing. The downside is, as you know, from Kickstarters and running in the public, like all these steps that you're not just the author, and definitely there's a lot of stress that resulted from that for when I was figuring things out. And now I don't hate the process. I'm fairly good at most of the steps now, which and then so for a lot of people, if they're willing to deal with the steps involved, it is definitely worth it. If that's not something that fits their life right now, then I think then that's where like a publisher comes in, where it's sort of different relationship with the book, sort of.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about it. Like I said, we kind of saw the quick kind of breeze through in the video, but we have this giant island that has popped up out of the sea, and it is this large sandbox for folks to go exploring on. And it's for OSC, which also means if you have another old school system or even want to play it in 5th edition, it's not going to be hard to translate it over to whatever 6 stat or D20 plus something system that you want to.
Yes.
Which is going to be really, really great for people to just be able to pick up and play it. Tell me a little bit more about like what you're excited about in the book. Like you kind of commissioned this project. Chances in it. What are some of the things that both of you were excited about creating together that have kind of come to fruition?
Sure. And to sort of get into the process a bit, we basically I said, hey, I'm looking for like a sandbox, a modular sort of mini region, and then Chance provided a couple options. I was like, this pirate sandbox with sort of science fantasy, Atlantis, Secret of Monkey Island, Pirates of the Caribbean inspiration sounds great. And then the vast majority sort of emerged initially from Chance, and then we have a back and forth sort of process as well, where there's sort of one sec, let me get my words together here. Developmental like sort of editing and sort of as we go back and forth on sort of the direction of the project. And so what we're both, I think, really excited about is the nature of the sandbox and the interconnections in the sandbox. Because I think something that's very important to both of us is that a sandbox not just give you options, but that it gives you context for the options and connects the disparate elements in the setting together in a weird patchwork of strings and hooks that gives it a unified whole, a sort of like a mosaic instead of just a bunch of tiles that are laying on the table, I suppose. And so big on NPCs who are connected to locations that are connected to other NPCs who want something from someone else. And I think that sort of that web can really trap players in a interesting situations and make it hard for them to avoid being involved in interesting things and just sort of run into bland stuff. It's very difficult to have a boring playthrough, I think, with the style of design.
Awesome. We got a question from the chat. Is it an A4 or A5?
A5. That's the
half
sort
page.
of OSE.
Yes.
Half page.
Standard.
Yes.
Yeah. So an A5, just so it'll fit. If you have space in one of your OSE boxes from backing OSE projects.
Oh yeah, just slide it
right in there. It'll fit in perfectly.
Yeah.
And so no, and also if somebody's just finding out about your work now, you've also made it really easy to get everything Joel has ever made on the campaign. Also too. Yeah. And I will say, like, the art on this also too, like, it's not the same color scheme, right? But we have seen some of those pastels. We have that kind of classic heavy imagery, at least on the cover, with kind of some of those soft edges mixed in, which I think is such a good hallmark of the work that you do.
I want to give a shout out to the artists that I've worked with on the covers in particular. So Desert Moon of Karth was Logan Stahl, who this one right here with the cowboy with the middle arm. And then we've got this one was Guy Pradell, who also did all the interior work as well. And then Logan has done, I wish I had a physical copy of Black Crag to hold up already, but did the cover art on Black Crag. And then Chance is doing all of the interior illustrations as well as the writing. He's really a double threat on the stuff.
Yeah, the internal art has very much like a Cheese Hasselberger, like good heavy line art flavor to it. I really love a lot of the different like kind of little interior pieces that we're seeing as like a really strong complement to the cover there. But I'm always jealous horribly whenever somebody who can write can also just do art, because I'm like, what's stopping you? What's stopping
me too.
Besides crippling imposter syndrome?
Whenever I see somebody who can actually do all of do amazing art and then write amazing things, I'm like, well, I'm happy being 50%, hopefully being able to do 50% of that with a book, and finding somebody who does everything else. That's awesome when someone's just multi-talented like that.
Awesome. You also have somebody where Sam Sorensen is doing the layout and editing
on this.
And then you've got Glenn, who is a phenomenal creator in their own right, who's doing all the cartography for you. So really, really killer team, really, really great looking project as well. And so like I'm very, very excited to see what's going on. So what have been some of the biggest shifts running the project? Like in the past, you've been very involved. And these are two communities that have their own ecosystems, and there's plenty of overlap between them. But Mothership and OSE are two very different systems. As you've been publishing this game, how do you feel like your background as a creator has helped you? And what have been some of the challenges as you kind of shift into publisher mode of engaging a new community?
Sure, I think a couple areas. So first, I think there's a lot of shared interest and overlap on the sort of Venn diagram of people who like Mothership and people who like OSE. It's there's definitely a lot of people who enjoy playing both. However, that's not everybody, right? There's some people only prefer like the stuff I've done on Mothership, and maybe OSE is not their cup of tea, which is fine. I definitely highly recommend Chance's stuff, and also this is where I give the shout out that I'll be doing Mothership conversions of all of the NPCs and monsters, because when you have a sci-fi game, you can make any episodes a sort of holodeck episode or a slick world or simulation. And so you want to break. It's a little fantasy game where, you die in the game, you actually die in real life too. And then it fits as well. You can really get that cross play. But anyway, with moving into OSE, I think for me in a lot of ways, it's coming home to a lot of my original interest as I work with Chance on this, and I have several large OSE projects that I'm interested in publishing as well. And I think going forward, I really want to find a way of sort of merging the two, making stuff that is interesting to both people who like Mothership, both people who like OSE, because there's a lot of creativity and like very passionate fans who are interested in both sort of styles, I think. And I think taking that Venn diagram, the slice in the middle, and providing stuff that's enjoyable for people who are, currently more on outside of the middle of the Venn diagram is sort of where I want to go moving forward with both my own work and then the writing of other folks like Chance that I'm publishing.
Well, I'm super excited to see this. I know y'all have a couple of stretch goals on there. You're already funded. You're coming up on the virtual tabletop asset one. And then potentially, if y'all keep on going while you pass that, the pay bump at 35K, are there any to come stretch goals that you might be able to tease or that you're really excited about if you potentially get things up high enough? Because I'm always looking for the scoop. I'm always looking for the +1 exclusive.
I will give a hint that there may be something musical involved at a certain level if we were to get there. Awesome. If not, well,
You'll never know. You'll never know.
You'll never know. We'll see. That maybe we should get there to find out.
Awesome. Great reason to go do it. I know Trash mentioned that the $55 level is literally insane for the main tier, as far as there's a lot of value at that $55 level. It's a very straightforward campaign. You're looking to produce a really good, solid, high quality book, but the deluxe edition includes an absolute amount of things. And then again, there's that $85 level where people can get everything Silver Arm. So if you heard us talking about Desert Moons of Karth, haven't ever checked it out, heard us talking about abilities considered unnatural, haven't picked it up, you can get it at that higher level, get completely caught up on the Silver Arm catalog also too, as well as lower levels that will just get you the hardbound or the digital edition as well. So I've been super, it's very, very exciting project. And like I said, it was very cool to see, you're not the only one. There's a lot of people who I've only seen create in Mothership, who right now with Hull Breach having happened, with the first edition coming out and people converting rule sets over, other stuff like that. This Zine Quest, we didn't see as much Mothership as we normally do. We also saw some people kind of flexing out into new spaces like you with publishing. So, which somebody was like, does anybody care to comment on this on Twitter? And I'm like, no, why would they? It's just my own dumb observation that this is a different thing happening only for good reasons. And so
it'll be interesting to see what happens with the whenever the box set comes out for 1E, right?
I think we're going to see a ton more really cool, very exciting third-party modules pop back up. I think we're going to see more of those throughout the course of the year. This weekend, guess what? I'm playing Blood, the Blood Fields at Black Star Station with
the Battle Royale.
Battle Royale. We're playing that for this weekend. On Saturday, we're playing this Ship is a Tomb, the Event Horizon-esque one by James Hanna.
And that one's on Kickstarter right now.
That one's on Kickstarter right now. And so there's plenty of great Mothership stuff still happening. But I always love seeing it when designers kind of change, grow. Love seeing how their voice translates in new space. Love seeing as they kind of step into different roles and try out new things. It's always very, very exciting. If people want to follow your work and stay up to date with what you do, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so I've got a website at silverarmpress.com. And then beside, I'd say that's the best spot. And then you can access all my various stuff on Drive-Thru or Itch or the Instagram. And then there's also a Silver Arm Discord that is linked on the website as well, where if you want to just shoot the breeze and talk about the stuff that I've worked with, or have some questions about one of the books, then feel free to hop on in there. And then also Chance, and if you want to find his previous work with like a Black Worm of Brandon's Ford, you can find that on his Drive-Thru RPG page. It's the best spot. And now it's up to being like a Mythrule bestseller or something. I have no idea exactly how many that is, but I guess a large number of people very much enjoy it.
And everybody ignore the fact that my drive-through RPG is in German. I don't know why that happens,
Oh,
but it
yeah, mine's
happens
stuck
all
in
the
French.
time.
I don't know why.
I have no idea why.
Mhm.
I did not change anything. All of a sudden, drive-through RPG, but also Kickstarter was German for me for like a week also too, and so
Yeah.
that has been fixed.
Mhm.
Also at Silver Arm, you can find out why point crawls are better than hex crawls if you want to right now.
That's
Or
the clickbait title right
that is
there.
the clickbait title. So if you want to
Mhm.
fight Joel about that, I think it was a great piece.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it, and I have a lot of feeling. Like I don't think I ever run a hex crawl as anything other than a point crawl for the most part.
Mhm.
Like,
We
but
definitely. I would love to talk about sandbox design sometime in the future. There's a lot. There's a lot to get into.
we've done a couple on it. We do need to do another follow up on it.
Mhm.
Sandbox design is one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite ways to play, also too.
Mhm.
I also I love what you were talking about the connections that y'all have kind of created in the
Mhm.
sandbox you have made around making it feel like, because I think one of the big things with hex boxes is one of the problems with hex crawls is one of the problems with dungeons.
Mhm.
And one of the big issues that comes up in sandbox is things can feel very disconnected. And if there's a story
Mm.
or a set of stories that are hooked together that you
Yes.
want people to be able to explore, how you actually get them hooked into those things when you're playing
Mhm.
in kind of an anti-canonical space can be very challenging.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of intention. And, Matt Sanders on Twitter the other day was talking about like a recent kind of Dungeons and Dragons Goodman Games crossover that's like a Dark Tower prequel thing, and there's like
Oh
there
yeah.
were a lot of things in the dungeon that just didn't make sense in the way that they typically do for Goodman Games,
Mhm.
because Goodman does a really good job of being like, why is this thing here? Like, why do you find these?
Mhm.
Not just because it's convenient or you need them or loot's
Yeah.
important, but
There's a
like,
background.
what's the rationale for these potions
Mhm.
of water breathing and being hidden here, other than the fact that your players are going to need them later to access this
Mhm.
underwater area? And sandbox play can, especially at its worst, very much start to have that
Mhm.
feeling of like this is just a bunch of random stuff that's all thrown together.
Everybody keeps saying I need to play Elden Ring, and experience, and it sounds great with the sort of seems like they do a lot of backstory building in terms of like that you can stumble across. Right, this is a world with a history, or you
Right.
can ignore it and fight
Just
giant
fight stuff, yeah.
flaming dogs or whichever.
And it's in the lore in Elden Ring. Not that I play, but I've watched my kids, and I just
Mhm.
tell them like you should die less every single time they die, because that's the kind of dad
That's
I
good.
am.
That's good.
I like it's all done through like items and things you look
Mhm.
at and things you find. It's none of it's
Yeah.
done through like cut scenes for the
Uh-huh.
most part or other stuff like that. There are a few of those, but like mostly it's like
Mhm.
the things you find up, the pieces you interact with, the parts
Yeah.
of the world. It's going around and looking at and poking things,
Mhm.
and at its
The
best,
lore is integrated in
yeah,
gameplay.
yeah, and
Like,
its best.
yeah.
That's what we start to see it do. Since we talked about that a little bit, what is so you? I know I've seen it in Desert Moon of Karth, even though it's
Mhm.
not ostensibly explicitly like a point crawl as a lot of the
Mhm.
vibes. It definitely engages a lot in kind of some sandbox concepts. But
Mhm.
for the current project, what are
Yeah.
kind of one of those hooks or connections that you're most excited about?
Mm. I think it comes down to let's see. Oh, there's a lot of good ones. Um, all right. So one element that there's sort of the layers of history I think to this place, which a lot of cool dungeons I've seen do this well, like Caverns of Thracia as well, where this Black Crag it has an ancient origin, and then it has a sort of middling ancient origin, and most recently there's some undead pirates who are involved in it as well, and then the hooks to these pirates at various places, the people who care about some of them, maybe the rumors of their treasure, how they're involved in it. The fact that there's an arch called a Trader's Arch, where sort of skeletons are sort of hanging on gibbets that reanimate nightly, and then have various behaviors that people might go there and talk to them and get stories about what's going on at the crag, or maybe just fight some skeletons and not ask them any questions, which is also always a valid player option. I think that type of interconnection with layers of history, I think Chance has done a great job of building this up and expanding upon his previous work as well.
Love it. Well, I can't wait to actually get it and hold it in my hands. It's a very
Hmm.
exciting project. I don't get to play as much OSE as I would like, but I do collect a lot of OSE books
Hmm.
and put them on my shelf, and they're absolutely gorgeous to look at. But hopefully we'll get this one to the table because sandbox play is some of my favorite type of play. And I love the OSC adventures that get made for OSC. I think they're incredibly well written. And some of the third party stuff like Through Eltan's Door, like This Looks, are absolutely games that I can't wait to get to the table and actually play around in a little bit more lots of the time. So very, very excited about that. We have a couple streams coming up later this week. Like I mentioned, we've got the Blood Fields at Black Star Station, a battle royale with Christian from Meat Castle Gameware, going to come run it for us here on stream. And then we have This Ship is a Tomb, a diabolical derelict crawl by Phalite Games. James Hanna is going to come run that for us. Come join us for both of those. James is nervous. James, if you're watching this, I'm sorry for outing you. James is nervous, so come cheer James along in the chat. It's their first time ever running a stream, and I told them, don't worry about it. You just have to run a game. I'll run the stream. But I'm very, very excited to sit down and get a chance to play with them and some other folks too. So come back and join us for that. The links to everything are down in the chat. You can also go to ttrpg.link / BlackCragKS to go straight to the Kickstarter as well. That links is down below our faces. This has been Prestige Class with Joel Hines, and with that, class is dismissed. Have a great day, everybody.